Recording in progress.
Test. Oh, there it goes. There it goes. Mayor,
Again?
we're ready.
Where's Simi? February 10th, 2025, joint work session of the City Council and Planning Commission. Tonight, there's one item on the agenda. Public comment is allowed that is germane to an agenda item. If you wish to speak, you are required to fill out a public comment card. And if you're speaking on behalf of an organization, you must fill out an affidavit that you have the authority of said organization. Please remember, this is not a time to engage the mayor or members of the city council in conversation. When your name is called, please come forward and speak into the microphone stating your name and address for the record. Public comment will be allowed for a total of 10 minutes per agenda item and no more than 2 minutes per person. Once the item is called, no other public cards will be accepted. Will the city clerk please sound the agenda item?
Mayor, that item for tonight is the Deerfield Implementation Plan discussion.
Thank
Mayor
you.
Jameson?
Sorry. I'm going to turn it over to Councilmember Doug Haney.
Thank you, Mayor. On this evening's agenda, the council will be discussing the Deerfield Implementation Plan. One component of the Deerfield Plan will be discussions regarding how the plan may impact Stone Creek Church. I'm in a leadership position at Stone Creek Church, and therefore, following conversations with the city attorney, I have decided to recuse myself from any discussions regarding how the plan will directly impact the church. Any decision points regarding how the Deerfield plan impacts the church will be for the other council members to recommend and determine. However, I want to be clear that when it is time to make a formal action regarding implementation of the entire Deerfield plan, I will be voting on that item, as that decision affects many properties above and beyond Stone Creek Church, and it is therefore appropriate that I represent my constituents on that matter. Thank you.
Thank you. First, we're going to have the presentation from Bob and staff, and then we'll have public comment after the presentation, and then we'll open up for discussion and questions. So with that, I will turn it over to Mr. Bobby Shimmy.
Destination Deerfield. I want to welcome the mayor, council members, and planning commissioners to this joint work session. Last week, we conducted a joint meeting with the DRB and Planning Commission to review architecture and the incorporation of landscape into the district. Architecture is so important to maintain Milton's look, feel, and identity. That meeting went very well. We got great comments and great feedback. Also, just quickly, I'd like to say special thanks to Jackie, Tracy, and Robin for all their assistance. They're here tonight to assist in answering any questions. Quickly, where are we on the schedule? We're in phase 3, which is code revisions. I'd say we're about 2, maybe 3 weeks running behind schedule between Thanksgiving week and the 2 Christmas weeks. It did push us back a little bit, but we're really working hard to catch up on that and maintain the overall project schedule. The main goal for tonight is to discuss 6 decision points and to get council and planning commission's guidance. So here are the agenda items for tonight's meeting. Now, what I'm going to do is just go over those 6 items so everybody knows what they are right up front. Then we're going to have general background on the project. And then when I'm done, we'll go back to the 6 decision items one by one so that we could talk about them. So for now, as a result of this study, I have 6 specific decision points that will touch on, and after the full presentation, we'll redisplay them again for discussion. The 6 specific decision points are: 1, exploring incentives in lieu of purchasing TDR densities. Number 2, reviewing the 50-50 ratio requirement for multifamily and townhomes. 3, allowing townhomes as a use along the Highway 9 corridor. Number 4, allowing townhomes as a use in T6. Number 5, allowing stormwater facilities to be counted as open space. And allowing the front portion of Stone Creek property to be a T5 zoning consistent with the corridor transects. Okay, so those are the 6. And we're going to come back to them at the end. So we have specific discussion and input. I do need your input. Okay, general overview. We had several large landowners looking to develop and redevelop their properties. And so the council requested that we study the area to ensure that we look at this in a more holistic and comprehensive view and not site by site. In addition, the council requested that we engage the community, especially those who live and work within the district, to better understand how they would like to see it built out and amenities that they would like to interact with, making Deerfield have its own identity. The phrase, "when you are in Deerfield, you know that you're in Milton," was something that we radiated throughout the study. So we are calling this project, for the purposes of the project, Destination Deerfield, to align with our goals and ideally build enthusiasm for this project. Deerfield as our economic engine. The mayor touched on this during the State of the City briefly. Deerfield is a large land area and is the largest commercial node within the city. It has been recently defined as being within the city's urban growth boundary, the UGB. This area has always been envisioned to be the economic engine for the city. This plan is looking 5, 10, 15 years into the future. It is the area that contains much of the city's employment base. It currently contains office space, retail space, along with many other housing subdivisions. These subdivisions include a diversity of housing types from single-family detached, townhomes, and multifamily apartment complexes. In addition, the district contains a mix of commercial uses, including several big box retail stores, such as Home Depot, Walmart, Kohl's, Target shopping centers. The community expressed during the community events that they would like to see these retail stores, the big box, stay within the area. It is also important to note that this district does have availability to public county sewer. Okay. These diagrams, the next 4 diagrams I'm going to show you, will be aerial views of different area sections of the district. And they'll show existing conditions, because I wanted to show Planning Commission and Council the location and approximate land area of both residential and non-residential uses within the district. So if you look at the first one, this is the most northern section of the district. There is Crooked Creek. We added some community names so you'd know where they are. The items in blue are the limited commercial areas within the northern section of the district. So as you can see, they're mostly along Highway 9. That's Highway 9, that corridor right there. And it's a very limited amount of commercial there. But there is some existing, and some sites could be redeveloped as commercial. Anything that's in blue. But it's mostly, from a land area perspective, it's mostly residential already. Next slide. All right, this is sort of more of the center kind of location. That is the public shopping center. There's the Pike Nursery. There's the CVS. That's Bethany going on an angle, and Highway 9 is the road going north-south. And you could see, you could see that everything to the right of that little node of commercial there is residential already. That's already developed. Okay, next area. Now you're going further south. There's existing commercial now. Most of that page is yellow, which is all residential, but the commercial node there would be the Target Shopping Center, which I think most people are familiar with. And you could see that it's again running along Highway 9 corridor. Limited amount of commercial there. It may look like a lot, but when you look at the total land area, it's a very small amount. Next. This is the southern portion of the district, which really has 2 things. The blue is the retail commercial area, which is the 2 big box stores. There's Walmart and Home Depot. And then there's a little hotel in orange. And the red is office space. So those are existing office uses right now in those red zones. There's Verizon, I call it the Tower site. There's the old City Hall site, and then I call it the H Building site, for lack of naming them, just so you'd know. Morris is there, and Deerfield Parkway is labeled, and then Highway 9 is labeled, and Webb Road is labeled. So, but it's in that small area. There is a small little section of residential. Those are townhomes that are existing there now. Most people are familiar with it. If you used to go to the old City Hall site to go to work, you remember those. Okay. So that's just to show you the ratio of what's there now and where things approximately are within this district. Currently, the tax-based revenue at large within Milton is about 11% commercial, 89% residential. There was a lot of discussion when we did the UGB on this. This is very low in comparison to adjoining cities. For example, Alpharetta is much higher ratio at approximately 40% commercial base. City staff has received interest from both standalone corporations, high-tech, interested in relocating to this area, as well as developers looking to construct retail stores and restaurants. And I'm going to emphasize this, and a lot of developers interested in building multifamily apartment houses. Multifamily is in such demand right now. I probably get 3 a week. People, I have 4 meetings at the rest of the week. After this meeting, I got other meetings. People still calling me up saying, Bob, we need to come in. We want to look at multifamily because multifamily is so hot right now. It's like such in demand. We have met with each of these landowners and business owners several times throughout this process to discuss their thoughts and share with them the city's vision and the community's vision. Through the process, we learned that office demand decreased due to COVID-19 and company policy to work remotely, leaving many office buildings empty. So a lot of that office space is vacant. I will note, though, that this trend is quickly changing. Companies are now onshoring versus offshoring and instructing their employees to return to the office. There's a new movement where everybody's like, get back to work, get back to the office. So things flip, like everything in economics, they move. Also, from speaking with local business owners within the area, existing retail and restaurants appear to be strong. Now, just to touch on the roadways within the district so that everybody gets an idea of where these road networks are in comparison to the sites that are potential development sites. Deerfield District is bisected by State Route 9. So you can see where State Route 9 is on the left, and that's the big umbilical cord that goes like the spine that goes way up from the county line to city of Alpharetta. So that's a big roadway there. More than 20,000 trips per day along Highway 9, and that number is most likely going to increase once that road widens from 2 to 4 lanes. Other major roadways within the district include Webb Road, which we're envisioning to extend via a flyover over 400 to connect with Alpharetta. So if you look at the map and you see Webb, it's right there on the bottom, the horizontal. Webb Road. Eventually, Public Works is considering doing a flyover 400 at that point. Webb Road just ends and dead ends there, and we're looking to take it and then connect it to Alpharetta. So that will be another major connection point. Currently, Morris Road, and Morris Road is on the right. You can see it. It comes up. Is being widened to 4 lanes currently, due to the new 400 exit at McGinnis Ferry interchange. So if you look, we kind of added that circle, and that's where the McGinnis Ferry interchange is. Parts of Morris are already 4 lanes, and we're just widening the balance of it. Lastly, Deerfield Parkway is the gateway to office buildings and the future city of Milton Park. This diagram will highlight roadway names and show how potential redevelopment sites are strategically located near these major roadways. So everything that's in gray is a potential development site. So you can see on the right, you'll see Fry's is at the bottom. Then there's the Target Shopping Center. Up on the left side is the church, Stone Creek Church. If you come down to the south again, the circular kind of piece is Verizon, and there's a little office building parked there at 25 acres, and then that large piece on the right is the H building, which is 77 acres, not 70, 68 acres, excuse me. Okay, community outreach was very important part of this project, and I just want to touch on it quickly, let you know where we are. So community outreach, both input and feedback. After many community engagement sessions and online surveys, we have created the idea of thinking of Deerfield to contain several sub-districts. So the applicability of potential new development or redevelopment on the north end would look very different than that which may be proposed on the south end, which is more commercial. This is in terms of density, use, and building heights. And we're going to show you the regulating map that the regulating plan currently kind of dictates that lower density, less use, less intensity as you go further north. But the idea of a sub-district is very important because I think it gives both the Planning Commission and the council the ability to say, staff, we'd like to have something, but it would look very different on the north end than it may look on the more commercial core end. So this way, it's not like one size fits all. You don't say, Bob, this is what it is, and it applies throughout the whole district. I think this district is big enough to have those sub-districts. The community, through this whole process, did have a strong desire to tie the sub-district idea together with the development of a multi-use trail. And examples of this would be the Alpha Loop and the Beltline. The good news is that much of the public portions of this trail already have been envisioned by the city and approved by council as part of the Trail Master Plan. So all these trail networks that the community was asking for, when we tied it back to the Trail Master Plan with Public Works, we said, geez, we already have that trail plan already in place and it's being constructed as we speak. But the difference would be that we would like to have offshoots of that off the public portions and into the private developers or the private developments. And I think that will really tie this together. So just vision somebody who lives in Crooked Creek being able to walk, bike, or drive a golf cart to available retail or restaurants in the southern portion of Deerfield. That was our envisionment with the community. As part of this implementation plan, new portions of this trail would be added or integrated as part of each new redevelopment opportunity. This trail could be integrated into a linear park or pathway through retail shopping areas. So we looked at it as either you can have a linear park along Highway 9 that would soften it, take the sidewalk from Highway 9 and bring it into the development, or we could even bring that sidewalk into the retail portion of a development, like say in the center of the Target shopping center, so that we kind of force people to walk through that and experience that. And maybe we have linear parks internal to that development. And then it also encourages people to use the retail and enjoy that retail experience. So there's a lot of opportunity here. And in speaking with all the developers, everybody's pretty excited about that integration because it will help their developments overall. And now that the city has taken over the development plans of Highway 9, I think it really helps us better coordinate between the private developments and the public streets, where before we had to go through GDOT to do that. Now we can talk directly to the developers and work that whole schedule and that plan out, really giving us much more flexibility. It's a real win for the city. Okay, the Deerfield regulating plan. I just want to touch on this because we did get some inquiries on what's a T4, what's a T5, what's a T6 from the community. And I've been working with Greg to respond to some folks, and I could see there why they would ask that. The current zoning outlined in the Deerfield Form-Based Code has several transect zones. This diagram shows the approved regulating plan. It's like a zoning map for the public. This is really the zone, tells you what zones you're in. The green represents T2, which is a more rural zone, and the darkest purple is T6, which represents the city's urban core. So if you look at the map, you can see the lake at the bottom in blue. That dark purple is the city core, that's T6, that's the most intensity, and I'm going to go through what that intensity looks like in a minute. The lighter purple in the middle is a T5, which is mostly along Highway 9. There is a small little area where Stone Creek Church is that's green. When we originally did the regulating plan, we kind of kept Stone Creek as a church in a T2 zone. But everything north and south of it is a T5 corridor zoning. And then if you look at the very, very top, it's a very light purple. I hope it looks that way. And that's actually a T4 zone, which has less density, less height restrictions, more height restrictions for less height. And you can see where that is. Okay, so a T4, let's go to the next slide, thank you. A T4 has 5 units per acre as of right. So you can get 5 density units per acre as of right. And we're not going to get into the math so much tonight, but if it's a commercial density, 1 unit is equal to 2,250 square feet of non-residential use. That could be a store, restaurant, could be a self-storage facility, anything non-residential, any use, light industrial use. And then, or it's unit for unit for residential. So if you have 3 houses, that's 3 units. So you're allowed 5 units in a T4. And if you utilize the TDR program, currently that's up, you can go up to 9 units per acre. You'd have to purchase that density through the TDR program. T5 has 9 units as of right, so you can see it's a little bit more intense. And you can go up to 14 units with TDRs, which is mostly south of Bethany Bend along Highway 9 corridor. And T6 has 12 units as of right. That's in our deepest, darkest area, right, the commercial core. And you can go up to 36 units with TDRs, which is the heavy corporate area, South End, Webb, and Windward Parkway. Now, staff is looking, as part of this plan, we are looking to reduce the TDR density within the T6, the TDR density within the T6 from a maximum of 36 units per acre to 16 units per acre. When we looked at the developments, which I'm going to show you, trying to achieve 36 units per acre is just totally astronomical amount of density, and we couldn't even fit it. So it's not realistic. And when we did this, they just thought of potentially having buildings at 12, 16 stories in height. And we're just not getting that kind of interest here. And to have that kind of density is just not achievable. I also want to cover a little bit about multifamily requirements, because we are going to talk about the 50-50 ratio. So I just want to give you some refresher on that as well. All right, can you get the next slide, I think, on the 50-50? The current use permit criteria for multifamily and townhome outline two options, okay? One is the 50-50 rule. And the 50-50 rule says you're allowed so much density, correct? So many units per acre. So if you're allowed 5 units per acre and you have 10 acres, you have 50 units. 50% of those units are allowed to be residential, up to 50%, and 50% would be non-residential. So again, non-residential could be light industrial. Oh, yeah, you can just go back. I'm sorry, I didn't want to show this. Yeah, that's good. Any type of non-residential use would be the other 50%. And the reason that we had done that initially was because this is our commercial district, and council at the time said, well, we really don't want to see it fill up with all residential, so we're going to put a 50-50 ratio in there to ensure that multifamily units, and potentially tonight we'll talk about townhomes, would always maintain a balance of 50-50. So we don't get absorbed with just all residential housing. Or number two option would be, and nobody's ever taken this, but it could work, is all ground floor uses within the development must have a non-residential base, which is what I call vertically integrated. So if you took every building, if you want to put on the Verizon site 10 buildings, and the ground floor was retail or non-residential, you could have, stores, offices. If every ground floor, 100% of the ground floor was non-residential, then you don't have to meet the 50-50. You just have to make sure every single building. The idea there was to encourage vertical integration of residential. Okay, so again, the 50-50 rule was applied by council to protect this limited commercial area from becoming predominantly residential. Again, we have very limited commercial land area. Multifamily is in high demand at present and has been over the last 4 years or so due to the lack of affordable housing. So with that said, let's look at the potential redevelopment concept plans. So this is where we get into the fun part now. We're going to show you the plans that people have come in with and what the city has looked at. So this slide is showing the highlighted red is all the developments where we have contacted these landowners and developers, and they have come in and said, Bob, we're interested in doing some work in Milton. And this slide really was the reason we started this whole study, was because when we looked at all of these land areas and sites coming in at once, totaling 320 acres. We said, geez, we better look at this holistically. We don't want to do this piecemeal, because this way we can look at it, the whole district as a whole, and really come up with a good solution. So currently there are 10 potential redevelopment sites that are shown, shaded in red, with a total of 320 acres. We have Stone Creek Church in the northern part and the Verizon campus to the south. So that's what you're seeing there. And they're all labeled. In the succeeding slides, I want to share with you the concept layout from the developers and the concept layout that the city staff did. The idea is to show some comparison and perspective of what we receive from the development community and how the city is working with them to achieve a more balanced plan. We note that the concept plans I'm about to show you are in draft stage. So before I show you individual slides, I'd like to show you a couple of videos. One is a white box video showing you, it starts off in the Verizon campus, that's Verizon, just to show you massing and build out. That's the current Verizon building on the left. You see the low one, Jagged? And then that's some retail. There's the city park that's undeveloped right now. See, you can see it's all trees. That's the city park. Then there's the old Milton City Hall site. And that's, again, more Verizon. And there's the lake in the back. And then there's the townhouses. And now we're walking over to the Twin Tower site, which potentially would be built out. And it's showing some retail and housing on that site. Now that's showing 4- or 5-story architecture. That is the H building site, with the H building being removed and light industrial uses and retail uses being put on that site. It's such a big site, and the H building is right in the middle, so they probably would take it down. That's the lake, which we'd like to turn into a nice amenity for the community, and we're going to show you what that looks like on the next video. You can kind of get an idea of the massing and how things are looking from the air. So that's Morris Road to the bottom, and that's the Verizon site on the left. There's the townhouses up on the top middle. So now you're looking at the Verizon site, built out. Now we're walking down Highway 9. So there's the Fry site, and they're proposing some big multifamily. So you see that off on the right. We wanted to show you what that would look like. And in front is low-scale residential. And then this is the Target shopping center, which potentially can have some buildings facing Highway 9. And then as you go north, the scale drops. And then you can see there's Deerfield Parkway. And now there's some low-scale commercial, and then housing in the back. And then as you go up now, Stone Creek Church is on my left, and you can see retail in the front and some housing in the back. Right now, that was a white box video. I'd like to also show you, we did a video going through the Target shopping center to show you what it would look like when you bring the trail into the Target shopping center. This is a more lifelike to show you what it would look like with ground floor retail, some multifamily housing. And this is along Highway 9, where we're bringing the linear park in there, where we have golf cart parking, outdoor seating. The buildings would be set back from Highway 9 a little bit to give you a better feel. But the idea is to keep the golf carts separate than the actual vehicle or parking that would be in the complex, so that people can come in and just kind of experience that. Now this here is an example of a trail that we're going to do through people's developments. We'll keep it very natural looking trail. So a lot of, like the Twin Tower site has a nice area. The Verizon site has a lot of potential for trails that are naturalized, and the community really wanted that. And this would be a developer constructed trail through those. And then this is sort of heading towards that lake. That's on the Verizon site on the opposite side on Morris, and that's going to be a broad walk that would come through, and people can experience. You could see the Verizon site off to the left, and you can kind of get an idea that people are transversing through these sub-districts, through these areas on these pathways and trails. Again, this one here, we're trying to show a little bit more height what it would look like to have taller buildings, multifamily. What does that impact look like visually? And you can kind of see it. I mean, the architecture will change slightly, but we were trying to illustrate what that would look like to have small areas of plazas and greens, but having some vertical height, because once you start putting multifamily in there, some of these complexes can get quite large. Okay, so now let's look at each individual lot just for a moment. This is the Verizon site. Now they've come in with 8 different plans, but this one we're illustrating is on the left. The orange is a multifamily building, which we
I
demonstrated.
think that's Fry's, Bob.
I'm sorry, Fry's. Did I say Verizon?
Yep.
I'm sorry. I apologize. Fry's. The left is the multifamily building that we illustrated in the video. The red is the small retail along Highway 9, and the yellow is townhouses. So when we looked at what they're proposing with the number of units, retail versus housing, they were actually at a ratio, everybody sitting down, 98% residential to 2% non-residential. So that's why we try to keep the ratios in there to some degree. Now, I'll show you the next one. Okay, on this one, staff did this, and we still have a multifamily on the corner. We have some townhouses on the bottom that would abut the new park. And we have a hotel, and we have retail in the middle. This one has got a little bit different balance. It's a 70-30. So because we have a multifamily unit in there, we pushed it to a 70-30. Without a multifamily unit, you'd be able to maintain easily a 50-50 ratio. But the minute you introduce the multifamily, that ratio is going to go to 70-30. And it's probably a little bit more appropriate. The 98-2 is not going to be a recommendation from staff. The 70-30 potential, if the 30% is retail. If you say, Bob, I just want 70-30, and the 30% is just non-residential, that means that corner building can just be a self-storage building and everything else could be housing. So, just trying to play out different scenarios for the council to kind of get an idea of why we have these rules in place, because otherwise these ratios would be very different. This is a T5 zone. Fry's is a 17-acre site. By right, they were allowed 154 units. With TDRs, we pushed this up to 229. So they are using some TDRs. Their plan, can we go back to theirs for a moment? Their plan is so dense with density, it's 360 units, which is not allowed in a T5. Even if they max the TDRs, they'd have to ask the council to rezone this lot to a T6 in order to achieve that much density, because you just can't get this with the T5 density. It's just not allowed. So just give an idea of density. All right, next, can we go back to the next one? No, next one.
Yeah.
All right, this is the 10-acre site that Orkin and Associates owns. Deerfield Parkway's on the right, Highway 9's on the bottom. It's 10 acres. And this site plan is showing a couple of things. One is it's showing a 75-foot buffer in the back of the site, which is one of the things I wanted to talk to Council and Planning Commission about tonight. If you notice, as of right, he could build this right now as of right, even with the moratorium in place, because it's all as of right zoning. He's got no residential at all. He's got all retail and office. The rest of it's a parking structure and on surface level parking. And he is entitled to this. I mean, this is what he's entitled to build on this. And he's used up 100% of the density on that site. Now, we looked at it and we said, this is great, right? So having 100% commercial, some people might say, Bob, is that great? And I'm really advocating for a mix, because now let's go to what City laid out. And this one is showing a little different concept. This is showing on the right side the commercial, which is the retail and office, a parking garage structure in the middle, and then on the left, the orange and yellow, the orange would be townhouses flanking Highway 9, and behind it would be single-family detached residences. And if you notice, we decreased or eliminated the buffer in the back. I think I kept like a 20-foot buffer in the back instead of 75. And we moved that land area buffer to Highway 9 and created the linear park along Highway 9. So it just softens up Highway 9 all the way down. And between this and the Target Shopping Center and Fry's, there's a lot of road frontage on Highway 9 in our commercial area that really could be enhanced and really softened for the community and really help out Highway 9 look more Milton. Now, we are putting in a median in Highway 9 with landscape, but with a 10-foot sidewalk on the side, you really have no room for any landscape or trees. So the buildings would literally be right up against that Highway 9 corridor, where here we are proposing a linear park in the front. We're also proposing, from a zoning perspective, a 70-30 split. So he's got 70% housing and 30% commercial. And you can see the commercial has a nice plaza that runs through it. It's a pedestrian. It's a street, but it's also a walkable, it's a limited access street, so it'd be a pedestrian plaza. So just to show you the differences in how things could be built out. All right, next. All right, this is the developer's concept layout along for Stone Creek Church along Highway 9. Highway 9's on the right. You can see the church is there, and the site is a through site. It actually goes all the way through Cogburn Road on the left. You can see it's got a little connection point. What we're looking for here is to maintain that same look and feel along the corridor. Saying, okay, we have T5 to the north, we have T5 to the south. The church, originally, we left it at T2 just because it was a church, but it really is inconsistent with the rest of the corridor. When staff looked at it and said, we really would like to see this enhanced and maintain the corridor look and feel, by putting the demarcation line and connecting the T5 to the north to the T5 to the south, you can see that dotted line in the middle of the page. That section, it's about 19 acres up in the front. We're proposing for council to look at and comment tonight on whether or not you think it's appropriate, and we think it's appropriate to make it a T5, keep it consistent with the corridor, keep retail in the front and residential in the back. The other nice part about this site is that we're looking to make a pedestrian connection because it's the only through site that we have that would then connect somebody from Highway 9 to Cogburn. So if you want to cut through, instead of going all the way up to the Target, to the public shopping center where the school is, and then cutting, we'd have a mid-block, so to speak, connection. And I thought that was really important and something the church was supportive of. Okay, next. Now let's go to the T6 areas. So the developer concept here, this is the Twin Tower site that's across from Deerfield Green, I believe that development is. There's Morris on the right. There's Webb at the top, and Deerfield Parkway's on the left. So there's a lot of different entry points to this site. The two office buildings in blue are existing. All that parking is existing. The developer came in and said, I'd like to add the orange, which is multifamily. They had 4 buildings of multifamily. On the left, they have townhomes flanking the whole side on the left. And there's townhouses on the left existing, but they put more townhomes in there. And then the small red areas is retail. And we looked at this and said, look, this is right now representing a 70-30. They're getting a lot of credit towards this percentage because of the existing multi-story office buildings that they're vacant, but they're there and they get credit for them. So right now, they could come in and just say, look, we just want to put a self-storage building in, or they could say, look, we just want to put housing and just balance the density that they have now from the existing towers and just say, look, we're going to put some more multifamily apartments in there and not actually build any retail. These are options that they have, but we worked with them several times. They came up from Florida and Texas, and we're trying to work with them. And we've come up with another plan, which they've embraced, and I'll show it to you right now. Please, Jackie. Okay, this plan is showing a reduced amount of townhouses on the south side. The blue is two buildings of multifamily representing around 60 units per building. So it's about 120 units total. There's the gray box is a parking structure. We still have the two white, which is the existing office. And then the rest of it is retail. The red is retail. And then we further went back to them and said, well, how about if we take the multifamily and put it on top of the retail so that we have vertically integrated retail, and then add some more townhouses to where the blue is, the blue buildings, and get rid of all that sea of parking and make it green and vegetate it into a park, and then have the parking structure. And they were totally embracing that thought. So this one is showing a 50-50 split, and it works. It works as a 50-50, and the developer came in and said, Bob, I'm interested. This looks nice, and I think I could work with you 50-50 and get you a nice balance of uses and do this development. Okay, next. This is the two-tower site that staff had come up with, and we had a hotel, and the developer said, well, you know what? I need to make sure I put enough land area in there for a hotel, so I'm ready for a hotel too. So let's not work away from the hotel. But I still had the yellow, which was the parking garage. I still had the vertically integrated housing above, and we still had some townhouses. So the difference here is we didn't have a standalone multifamily building. Staff said, no, let's vertically integrate it and leave the site for the hotel. But it does balance. It shows that it balances within the density available at a 50-50. And that's important to know, because I think that was a good concept there, and it really would enhance this development site. All right, next. All right, now we're jumping to Verizon. So the city park is on the left. That's the green. We are showing a road going through the city park. I know it hasn't been developed that way, so please don't hold us to it. I'm just showing it that way because I think it's a nice connection point. I wanted to show the importance of that, connecting Highway 9 to Deerfield. But this is not about the park, so don't hold me to it. This is Verizon. The lake is up on the top, and then you'll see the yellow on this scheme is all townhouses. The purple is office, and the blue, I think, is multifamily. No, I'm sorry. The blue, can you read that? The blue was,
Office,
the blue is office,
yellow is residential,
yellow is residential, and the red is the retail.
retail.
And they're only saving one of the three buildings. So out of the three buildings on the Verizon site, and this site, so the council knows, is in play. It is up for sale, and there's several developers looking to be interested in purchasing this site. But this particular scheme, it's a 55-45 split, so I don't see any reason why we can't add a little more retail and get it to a 50-50 number. I think we can achieve that. There is some surface parking there as well and some of these incentives I'm going to talk to you about tonight potentially can eliminate that. Okay, next. And this was staff's plans, the last one, I believe. This is just showing maintaining the three buildings, putting a hotel and retail. Some corporations have come in and said, look, we're not developers. We don't really want housing. We just want commercial, office and retail and hotel. And so there's a lot of interest in that as well. It doesn't always have to be housing. Now, housing would bring in the most interest when you're looking at this. Okay, next. Okay, so we're going to get to some decision points. Everybody's okay? Do we need a break before decision points? We're good?
No, Bob, but can we, at some point, we're going to need public comment.
Okay, do you want to do
But-
that before the decision points, man?
No, I think maybe explaining some of these incentive items that we're talking about,
Okay.
and then we'll do public comment, maybe right after this slide.
Okay, so this would be decision point number one. I mentioned earlier that I have 6 decision points for discussion, and I will need guidance. So decision point number one is the council and planning commission open to exploring the concept of incentives in lieu of purchasing TDRs? So right now, just briefly, I'll say that the TDR program has had some challenges with availability and cost. However, to induce development, we would like the council to consider adding incentive density as another option to the TDR program densities. So it's not in addition to the TDR density, it's in lieu of. So you could still buy some TDRs, you could use the incentives. The TDR density will still be the maximum density permitted, but you will be able to blend incentive densities with TDR purchased densities. So this table shows an example of incentive items and the equivalent density, which is up for discussion, for each item. Again, this is just a draft, right? It can be changed. Now, before we get into the individuals, I just want to note that this is not new to the city. The city has done this on a smaller level, this concept, in Crabapple. So if you construct a public parking building, you will receive bonus density. So instead of purchasing that density on the TDR program, you're receiving that as a result of building that public structure as an incentive to build it. And we have it. I mean, Adam Orkin has done it in his development. It's surrounded by retail. It's very hard to see. And Beecham's have done it on Market District. Those garages are actually under the buildings. So when you go over there, you don't even see them from the street. They're all buried underneath, and they have buried parking structures. So, and they got density from it. Another density bonus that we've played with in Crabapple was resulting in the lake at Mayfield. So what we did on that development is we told the developer, look, we'll give you some density. You have to give us 5 acres of land. You have to 4 acres for a lake. You have to construct a dock. You have to construct pathways, pavilions. You have to landscape it. So they improved it. But we did give them some density for it. And we got the amenity. Now, incentive density also achieves 2 main functions. One is it shifts the cost of activating community amenities to the developer versus the city having to fund the cost. So if you look at Alpharetta, they built public parking structures. They had to buy the land, they built the buildings, they paid for the buildings, and now they have to maintain those buildings, right? And here, what we're doing is saying we're going to shift that to the developer in a sense of saying, okay, we'll just give you some density, but you have to do that in order to achieve that density. So it kind of takes that financial burden away from the city. And that has helped us. Also, it keeps the benefit, the amenity, within the district versus shifting the benefit to areas outside the district. So if you buy TDRs, we're telling the people who live in Deerfield, okay, somebody on the west side of Milton is going to, see a farm being maintained. But the people that live in Deerfield, they don't really get any direct benefit. In fact, they get penalized. They just get more density. With this, would then shift that. We'd have more amenities in Deerfield for the people who live and use Deerfield to actually enjoy those amenities. So I thought that was another one, shifting and keeping that amenity or that benefit in the district. So if you look at these, if you don't mind, I'll turn around. We're going to create civic spaces for sites of more than 8 acres. So 8 acres is the requirement right now. 8 acres, 10% has to be civic. So we have that in the code. If you have more than 8 acres, you got to have 10%. Okay. But we're trying to say if you have 15%, if you go to 15%, maybe you get another quarter unit per acre as a benefit. And if you go to 20%, you get half a unit per acre. And if you get 30%, you get 1 unit per acre. So if you look at the Twin Tower site, it's 25 acres. So if you say, okay, 25 acres, if he gets rid of all that parking and builds, he could say, okay, I'm doing 30%. You're going to give me 25 more units that I don't have to purchase. I'm just going to get them. But I'm going to build a park. I'm going to get rid of all that and develop it as a park. Donate the civic space to the city and you'll get more density, like they did with the park in Mayfield. Construct a trailhead with restrooms, maybe a half a unit per acre. Construct features like broad walks, trail bridges, you get some density. Construct a parking garage structure, 1 unit per acre. And potentially maybe public art, visible from a right of way, subject to city council approval, you get some density. So the list could go on and on. I mean, I want some discussion on what you thought. I was just trying to throw ideas, whatever the council and the planning commission think is a good idea. I'd say that that's a good way to look at incentivizing density in the area.
Okay, I think now's a good time to have public comment.
Yes, sir.
Tammy, will you call the first speaker, and it's 2 minutes per speaker.
I'd like to invite Laura Bentley to the podium.
Which podium? Is it that podium or that podium? That one. Okay. This one.
You can give the handheld if you'd like, Tracy. Or Robin. We got a handheld, Miss Bentley.
There's one right there on the podium.
I am Laura Bentley, 2500 Bethany Church Road. Thank you so much for the planning session tonight. I think all these people in this room talking about something that is so important is great. I attended the December stakeholder meeting, which was awesome. We got a glimpse at these plans, and it's solid and it's long overdue. Because our Deerfield area is critical. We want to retain our retail space. We want to be sure that we are visionary in all that we do. Young people are moving back to our town, and that's so great to see. And the things that they are looking for are in these plans. It's exciting. I'd encourage you, council and planning, to lean more into fee simple, higher density townhomes, away from condos.
1 minute.
Mix of use, the ratio is very important. We need to retain our retail. Finally, please consider a connection to the 100 acres of green space and the 5-acre lake at Providence and Bethany that is inside 2 miles of Deerfield, and people will move here. There's no reason for people to go to Alpharetta to the Greenway. We have green space here, and it is another great feature of our city that will attract the very best, and folks need the access to that. I applaud the green space within the developments, but big green space. We own it, and we are taxing people for it, and they can't get on it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mayor, that concludes public comment.
Okay, thank you. We'll close the public comment, and I'll ask Bob to come up to the podium and start talking about some of these decision points.
Mayor, would you like to discuss each one
Sure.
right away?
Yeah, I think that'd be appropriate. So we go back to that slide, Jackie, if you're decision point
Jackie,
one.
can you just go back to that slide with the incentives?
Bob,
please?
one of the questions I have
Yes.
before we get into it is the TDRs. So I like to visualize things. So a developer it is a mix and match. They can use TDRs and they can use the incentives. Is that?
That's correct, up to the maximum TDR ratio. So if the TDR is 5, if your as of right is 5, then you're allowed to go up to 9 and say you use some of this. You could say, okay, I'll build a parking structure, I'll donate some civic space. And then if I still want more and I don't want to do the incentive, I could go out and buy the balance of it through TDRs.
All right,
Because they're allowed to do that now.
I have two follow-up questions. One, how many TDRs have been used in Deerfield since we've started this in like 2011, I think was the TDR program?
None.
What?
In Deerfield? Well, yeah, we used a little bit.
Yes, there's been projects that
Yeah.
have utilized the TD. No, 2 projects, actually, no, 4 projects in Deerfield utilizing the TDR, although that is a very small amount in comparison to what we're proposing. So
I think
yes.
it was the self-storage.
Yeah, there were 2 self-storages, the
self-storages.
stack flats, and I'll have to look at the other one. So yeah.
Okay, follow-up question. Does the TDR program determine what is undevelopable land or developable land? So if I'm a landowner that has 10 pristine acres and 5 acres of swampland in the floodplain, does the code allow now that a developer can use the swampland as a TDR? Do we determine
So
that?
it's funny you ask. I'm working right now on a presentation to you all on the 19th, but to answer the question, it's divided between constrained land and unconstrained land, i.e. the unconstrained is like no stream buffers, no bodies of water, no wetland, no floodplain. They get 100% credit. So every acre of unconstrained land, you get 1 full credit. And then once you get above 5, you have, let's say you have 10 acres of unconstrained land, then you would get an extra 2 credits on top of 10. So you get 12. In regards to constrained lands, you only get 1 TDR per 4 acres of constrained land. So it's not treated equally as, I mean, unconstrained is 1 and then TDR per acre, but constrained with the buffers or floodplain, you have to get up to 4 acres to get 1 TDR. Does
So
that make
that
sense?
mayor is on the sending side.
Correct.
It's
So
ascending,
that's
yes.
somebody that's got a farm in Milton and wants to assemble TDR credits. On the receiving side, they'd only be allowed to build, where they're allowed to build. You can't take, something that's in a buffer and say, well, Bob, we're going to build in it because we bought TDRs. It's only on the sending side.
That's not a decision for tonight, but at some point in the future, we might want to look on why we have TDRs for constrained land that will never be built on anyway. I mean, that just might be a
Yeah.
discussion in
Right.
the future.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, I see what you're saying.
okay.
Bob, do you want feedback on this decision point?
I do.
I'll
Can
give-
can I ask one question, sorry, as a follow-up to Peyton?
Yeah.
On those, the mayors, on those 4, where was the offsetting, we're talking about one of the benefits of this is we keep all of the benefits within Deerfield.
Mhm.
Where were the trade-offs for those projects?
Well, on those projects, I mean, if they build a public trail through the project, we're proposing that they get some incentive density from it. If they take on the tower site, if they take all that parking out that you saw
No,
that
I mean, on
whole,
those 4 projects that Robin just mentioned, they leveraged TDRs. Did they buy those or was there a trade?
They did.
those,
So-
on those 4 projects, I'm sorry, those 4 projects, they bought them.
They did.
Correct, yes.
Yeah.
And currently, there is only 1 holder of TDRs, although on the 19th, you'll be looking at a second entity that wants to create TDRs. So,
But again, the TDRs have been done at a very limited basis. If somebody came in and said, Bob, I want 40 TDRs, there's just nobody out there with 40 TDRs at this point. And maybe they would, I don't know, but right now, we're not seeing that. And the developer has to sort of put all that money up and buy it. It's a private transaction. So they'd have to go to the landowner and cut that deal and do everything and pay for it. Where the other way, it's an improvement in their development through the incentive program. It would be an improvement in their development, which would then help them, sell units or get people to rent office space, to kind of keep those incentives. In a sense, it's helping them. It's like when we did the Mayfield Park. We did give them some density, But when they sold those units, they sold them for more money because they said, well, look, you have this beautiful public park and look, you can enjoy that public park. So everybody said, oh, that's sort of a nice amenity to have right here in my backyard. And so it sort of helps the developer.
So Bob, to that end, that concept of giving incentives is not new. We've done this before.
That's correct. We've done it to a smaller scale
Yeah.
in Crabapple and very successful. When we started, we did a whole study. We hired a consultant. We said when we were master planning Crabapple, we said, okay, we're going to have to buy some land, enough to build a parking structure on it. We're going to have to then spend money building the parking structure, and then the cost to maintain it is just astronomical. It was just as much as building it. And we said, okay, geez. And I looked and I said, well, guys, we're a new city. We don't have enough money to do this, and we're going to just get ourselves into debt. And, we want to do everything. Let the developer do it. Why are we doing it?
Yeah.
So by incentivizing it, the developer has done it. They are maintaining it. And I'll be honest with you, I came here Saturday at lunch with my wife. And when we did this, people told me nobody would ever use a parking structure in Crabapple. It's just not going to work. And we came here Saturday to get lunch. I drove through Anna Morgan's parking structure, the bottom level, totally packed. I went to the top level, totally packed. I couldn't believe it. I had to come all the way back to City Hall and park here because I just couldn't get a spot. So that's really what a success story. People are coming out. They are using these incentives.
So Bob, here's my feedback at a high level.
Yes.
I like the incentives. And you said it well, it keeps the value or the benefit created within the district. Right? And I think that's where the value should stay. I think from a financial standpoint, it benefits the taxpayers, right? It's less the taxpayers have to shell out to acquire a pocket park or parking garage and the like. So I like that aspect of it. And ultimately, it gets the developers the density that they need to build their plan. What I don't know is the density bonus. Are those numbers correct? I don't know. I'm sure you and your team will figure that out. But at a concept level, I like the idea of the incentives and keeping that value and the benefit local, getting the developers what they need, and keeping the tax or keeping the financial implication off the back of the taxpayer. So in that regard, I'm aligned with the incentives.
Bob, when you're looking at these incentives, if we maintain a 50-50 structure, does a developer purchasing, say they want to add civic space to get the higher density, does that also allow them to change their balance between commercial and residential? Or do they still have to stay whatever we decide is going to be that?
Yeah, whatever we decide. So if
So they can't incentivize their way out of that.
That's correct. They can't buy the incentive density and say, I'm just going to use it towards housing. They're still subject to the 50-50. So they're just getting more density
We'll
units.
get like one residential unit and one commercial
And one
unit,
commercial
or
unit.
whatever that
Yeah.
ratio is.
They'll get more that way. That's correct.
Question, do any of these incentives put us in a position where we're going to end up with something way more dense than we would normally have in that zoning? Like, are any of the properties big enough where that would be an issue?
Well, yes, good question. That's in the beginning, I said that the TDR density for T6 right now, max is 36 units per acre. And I just said that's way too high. 12 is the base. And I said, if you go to 16, that would be good. But to go to 36 would be enormous. So on a 50-acre site, if you're allowed 600 units as of right, and then you go to my 16, you can go to 800 units. So from 6 to 8, you get 200 units max. But if you go to the 36, which is in the code right now, you go to 1,800 units. That's huge. That would just be way too much. So what we're doing is a great question. What I'm trying to do is cut down the maximum number of TDR units so that we don't over incentivize and we don't get more density than we're thinking we need. And I'll make sure that that works on all of them.
So there would be a capacity or a threshold that you couldn't exceed.
Right. So we're just going to cut down. We're not taking away anybody's base density, right? But we are cutting down that TDR purchase density because like Councilmember Johnson said, we don't want to over incentivize it where all of a sudden we have so much density.
Right.
So that's why I'm looking to cut that TDR max down. It's great, great. Thank you.
Bob, the current breakdown between taxes from residential and non-residential is what?
The last I checked, which was 8 months ago or so, we did a run through it. It was, I think it was about 8% versus, what did I say it was? What was the total
11.
number?
Not 92 to 8?
11% you said commercial tax.
11 to 89. Sorry, make sure I get that right.
And what did you
That's
say?
what it was there. We had done a study where we looked on the, remember the original study we did with joint between us and Alpharetta? We did that joint study on that area of Wynwood Parkway. And they came back and said, okay, you get 20,000 trips per day. And this is your commercial ratio. And then they further went in and said, well, how much vacancy do we have? How much retail do we have? How much commercial do we have? So I could get you all those numbers. We have those all charted out. But our balance was so off compared to other adjoining counties and cities. And I guess I was just trying to say that because I really feel that it's so important to maintain some commercial presence here, because otherwise that balance really gets thrown off. When we did the UGB program, we sat down with a group. We had a nice stakeholder group, and everybody sat down. And the biggest concern was, you're just putting all the burden on the residential side of Milton. And, why are we paying so much more burden on the tax side for residential when normally the commercial absorbs a lot of that tax base and kind of softens the
So that's my
residential?
next question is, have you run the numbers to see what the impact, if you were to implement all these projects as you would propose, what would be the impact then to that tax mix?
It's a good point. I have not run those numbers.
Do we have a target percentage of commercial that we would like to see in Milton for our tax benefits?
Well, I don't think we'll ever achieve the 40% that Alfred has.
No, and I'm not saying we should.
But I'd like to see it more in that, 20% range, where we keep that number up there, so that we could say, look, we do have some retail, but we don't have it all on the residential.
Mhm.
But I haven't run those numbers.
Okay, I was just curious, like what would be like a healthy percentage for a city of our size?
Yeah.
To
Yeah.
understand what the impact is to all property owners and all residential property owners.
Okay.
I guess I have a comment. From 2006, when the city was formed, they've been very, deliberate and successful and purposeful defending the commercial space. Because again, you're saying that's our economic engine. And now all of a sudden we're diluting that. Right now we're going from, instead of 50-50, we're looking at 70-30. So that's going to dilute that by almost 40%. So that's going to put us way under what we have now. So I don't know how that is going to be economically feasible. Number one. Number two is what problem are we solving with the increased density? We're looking at some of these going up, 300% for the density. What problem are we solving? Because again, when they put the city together, they said, okay, this is the density we want here. This is what we want here. And all of a sudden now you're coming in saying, okay, we're going to blow up the density we're going to increase the density tremendously when you start looking at this with townhomes and multifamily. What problem is increasing the density solving for us? Why are we doing that? Why are we looking at increasing density so dramatically? I don't understand.
Well, I'm not saying we should be increasing density. Right now it's 50-50, and I showed you what the base densities were. And I am saying that we should cut down the TDRs, which was brought up, good point. So I'm saying this is what they have as of right. Right
Correct.
now, they are coming in. They're coming in saying, Bob, I'm purchasing this property. I'm spending $50 million for it. I want to build out to the max. I want to increase this density.
Right, and that's their job. Our job is to keep Milton.
Yes,
That's why is everybody, I think, is run on that. So, my concern is this doesn't. We're adding substantial density to that area. we're reducing the commercial component, which again, we've said is our economic engine. Why are we looking at increasing the density? I guess that's the bottom line question I have. Why are we looking at doing that? Just because developers want it?
Well, I'm
They'll
not
always want it.
really, I'm going to make sure this is clear. I'm not really increasing density on any of these. The density is the densities, and I've always said we're keeping the densities the way they are. So if anything, I'm lowering the TDR. The incentive program, they were allowed to go out and buy that TDR density and do it. What I'm trying to do is say, look, instead of buying it and building something, build what we want you to build. We can incentivize by saying we want a park. We want a parking structure to get rid of the sea of parking.
The zoning already allows for 50/50, right?
The zoning currently allows for the 50/50.
But again, going back to some of the slides on the developers, the two towers, we're looking at 300 units by right.
That's correct.
Now we're talking about adding to, making that 466 units. That's a substantial increase. That's almost a 50% density in
Well,
units.
they're entitled to that through the TDR program is what I'm saying. So we're not giving away any density here.
You're suggesting they could buy that with TDRs, or we could incent them to build that park. And they'd get the same amount of density they would get otherwise, but we get a park out of it.
That's
Is that what you're
correct.
saying?
That's right. We're not increasing densities at all here. They are entitled to this density right now.
But to Kurt's point too, you're also not reducing the amount of commercial or the amount of non-residential. You're just incenting them.
With the incentives, we're just saying, we'll talk about the 50/50 next. That's number 2. Right now, we're just talking about incentivizing that instead of them going out and buying TDRs and buying units, we can incentivize certain things that we would like to see in the district. So like increased civic space, parking structures to get rid of the big sea of parking that I showed you.
So
public
Bob, just
art,
so, Bob,
things
so
like
I'm clear, they could with TDRs come in and get to 70/30, as you suggested in the layout number 1. Your proposal is to bring them back down to 50/50
Yeah, they're not
through
allowed to do,
incentives.
they're not allowed to do the 70/30 right now. They can only do 50/50.
It would
TDRs
require
only would increase the
TDRs to do
density.
that.
They could only increase the density by that. So for example, going back to the two towers, they'd have to buy 166
Requires
TDRs in order to do
get the
the
number
concept
they
that's
want.
presented to us.
Right, which puts you at that ratio.
If that's what the
They're not
numbers
allowed to
were.
do that.
I'd have to
I mean,
look-
it went from
Tracy,
300 to
those are
100
numbers?
to 466
Unless they got
units.
TDR.
Yeah.
You're
They're not allowed
trading
to
off
do
the
it all.
TDR fee for
Even
a
if they
park.
bought TDR.
And Bob, what's the current vacancy rate over there? Or those buildings? Where's
right now,
where's the economic engine that we've all thought we were going to have
Well,
over
the
there?
office buildings are all 100% vacant. They're empty. There is nobody's employed in any of the office buildings. They're really all gone. The retail is doing pretty good, like Orkin's retail is strong. I spoke to Adam Orkin. He said retail is strong. He's very happy with retail. I know a lot of people told me, oh, let's stay away from retail, but on the ground, people are telling me retail's really hot, it's strong, and that's why we're showing retail, because, I don't really envision Milton being just all housing, and then we go to Alpharetta for our retail. We should be able to get our own retail right here and have the nice kind of retail that we're looking for, so then we could really work with them to make sure that we get the level of retail. There's all different levels of retail, right? Very exclusive retail, like Dollar General retail. So, we want to make sure that we work with the developer to get a nice retail in there. But all those buildings, Mayor, are office-wise, from an employment standpoint, are empty right now. And we're trying to reactivate those sites.
Right, and to your point, right now, I view, you said this is a 15 to 20-year decision. I view it more like a 30 to 40-year decision for us. And right now, with COVID, with everything else, office space, is not the place to be. However, as you mentioned too, it's turning around. I don't know if today we can say, oh, we won't need that going forward because it's empty now. I don't necessarily agree with that. Again, I just don't know. So you're saying this is density neutral, that all those buildings, all of that is density neutral, whether it's 50/50 or 50/75, and all of these things where it's by right 300, developer concept 466 units, you're saying that's equal density?
I'm saying right now, on this particular one, the density is neutral. The next topic we're going to talk about is the ratio of that density, residential to non-residential. We haven't had that discussion yet, but I need that input back from you all. But right now, we're just saying this is density neutral. But what I'm trying to do with the density is instead of them purchasing density, get them to incentivize to buy, to build certain things that we would like. Like I think Mayfield Lake is a great benefit to the city of Milton. Had we not given an incentive, he would have just went out and bought that density and he wouldn't have given us the lake, right? He could have just bought it. So instead he put the money into the lake. He built a new dam, he built the lake, he did everything. So now we have this beautiful lake and this nice amenity as a result of what that is. I'm sorry.
Judy?
I'm just making sure I'm following the money.
Yes.
So if a developer wanted the increased density, they could spend several $100,000 worth of money and buy a TDR.
That's correct.
The city benefits because we have more rural areas preserved to be rural, and that landowner would benefit, but they just get more density. I think what you're saying is take those hundreds of thousands of dollars, invest it in a civic space, a park, a parking garage that otherwise the city would likely need to invest in
Okay.
and spend that taxpayer money to get the same amount of density.
That's
But in
correct.
either case, the amount of density they can increase by is either capped. They can either buy it through TDR or buy it by
Developing the
by
incentive.
building things we
That's
want.
correct.
Okay.
That's
Wow.
correct. And that's why I was looking to study reducing that TDR density down. As I said, look, 36 is just way out of whack. And I think Councilmember Johnson said it quite elegantly that we just have way too much available density there. I don't want to take away anybody's base density because that would be a taking, but the TDR density, we can cut that down so people can get some incentive density, right? Or buy the TDRs, but they can't overdevelop the lot.
So going back to the decision point,
Commissioner-
one of the issues is I want to make sure whatever, and I'm okay with the incentives. I think that's great. And, these civic spaces, these connections, because we're not talking about today. We're talking about 20 years from now when this is all done. We don't want this to be Holcomb Bridge Road or other areas where there wasn't any action done, right? So we want to make sure we're thoughtful of this and we look very forward. The question I have is, if we want the developers to do the incentives for the community to make sure we have the right densities, right? Why would we still allow the TDRs to have a either, like, give me the reason on the either or, but because if the city wants them to do, a park, which I would prefer, a couple acres preserved there compared to some swamp land that's never going to be built on, anyway, I think that makes a lot of sense. So I'm just curious, because we created the TDR program in 2011, and it's rarely been used. I don't want to create this program for incentives and the developers don't use it. So I want to make sure whatever we do, it's going to be used to what we want and what the neighbors want.
So let me make sure I get it straight. It's a good point. Maybe we keep the TDR densities, but we say then no more TDR program in Deerfield. We just allow them to do the incentives. Is that what you're saying?
This is just a discussion point.
Okay,
I don't want
just
to,
asking.
I'm just something
Okay.
to really think about. Or you lower the TDR density and have the base and have the incentive density go up.
Higher.
I think there are ways to do this. I think we've learned with the program and base densities and TDR since 2011, what works and what doesn't work. So,
Okay.
and like, for example, I don't know if a couple picnic tables is 0.25 units an acre. I think there probably needs to be some more meat to that. I'm sure y'all are working on that.
Yeah, I was just
So,
trying
yeah,
to
I know,
put some
I know.
examples. Just to get some feedback.
Personally, I'd like to see us just remove the TDRs from the Deerfield area and go with the incentives. I think the incentives are important. We need as much as we can in that area to green it up. We've got an awful lot of asphalt and not much else. Especially if we look at some of these larger areas and what could happen to save the Verizon property. The Verizon property right now looks really nice. If we're not careful, we're going to destroy that. And I think by taking a look at the incentives properly is much better than what we've, I think, all mentioned about taking TDRs from someplace else in Milton. We need that in Deerfield.
Sort of what you were saying, right, Mayor?
Yeah, I mean, I'm
Just as an idea.
Yeah, would love, when this goes to the planning commission, we'll love them to kind of talk about that and what, it's just important that we get the right look and feel for this area. And I always work on visual, like 0.25 units per acre. What is that going to look like? So maybe give some examples when this does go to planning commission. This is what we're looking at. So,
Okay. Okay.
does anybody have anything else on decision point one?
I just wanted to kind of clarify again, sorry, I just wanted to clarify again about the incentive and how that would work. And also if you could give an example on how that negotiation has happened in the past, like what made the developer go with the incentive? Like what, again, I'm just trying to understand, like, where is the benefit for them? And then how does it also still keep in line with the density that we would want?
Well, the benefit for the developer is if they build a beautiful civic space like Anna Morgan did across some City Hall, I think everybody in the city of Milton is enjoying visually seeing that space and enjoying using that space. And yet, he developed it, he improved it, and quite frankly, he's maintaining it. And it's an extreme amount of money to do that. And if the city does that, now the city took the incentive from Mayfield Lake, and we said, okay, we'll take the whole lake, we'll take all the land, so we own it, but we are maintaining it now. We are
Well, what
looking
did
at it.
he
So
get
it's sort
from
of-
that? What did he get
They
from
both got density.
he got more
They
density,
got density. That's correct.
which was, for instance, is it still the 50-50? Like when you
They
say
were
he got more
always within
density,
the ratios. Nobody, they were all in the ratios that what we wanted.
All in the
What
ratios.
Anna Morgan did here is, it was all commercial. So you didn't really have to worry about any
Bob,
ratios of
but to that
50-50.
end, did they get more density than they would have gotten otherwise if they had paid for it?
No, they would have
That's-
just had to buy it.
That's right.
So instead of buying it, they went ahead and
Horse traded for it.
horse traded some density for it. And we got the benefit from it because
It's
even
not
with,
more density than they would have gotten otherwise.
that's correct. I mean, the parking structure here, I think looks great. And otherwise Anna Morgan would have had to put surface parking in, would have been double the amount. We would have been staring at surface parking.
Smeek, does that answer your question though?
so no, I mean, I'm trying to understand kind of the density. So for instance, is it where residential goes up, commercial goes up? Like what is how does it stay in line? Number one, I guess that's the first thing.
Well, the next decision point will be the 50-50 ratio if they use multifamily and townhouses, which most people are proposing. If they just go 100% commercial, they would just have another retail building.
Yes, I think what he's saying is the density is the exact same. The ratio is the same too. They could have gotten that density if they'd have paid money for it or if they built a park. Either way, the density isn't changing, not at this decision point anyway. That's the next. one.
Right. So then I guess, going back to like what incentivized them to go with the incentive route versus,
They didn't have to pay for it.
They didn't have to buy the density, but they did have to make the
and
improvement.
it still saved them that cost, I guess.
Yeah, I
versus-
think it helps their improvement. It helps their district, right? I mean, it's nicer. It's got nice parking structure. People can use it. I mean, just to make sure I'm clear, I don't want to misrepresent anything. Anna Morgan didn't get extra density to build a park. That was just part of what he did. He only got some extra density for the parking garage. The park was just a requirement and he built the park.
But Bob,
And improved
a good example is Mayfield, the district of
The
Mayfield.
Mayfield district.
We got the park,
Yes,
we got access to land, a new park, by giving them more density. But they didn't have to go buy a TDR for it. Rather, we said, build us a green space, give us a park, and you get more density.
yeah.
Yeah.
So that really worked out nice because they gave us the land. They made the improvements So they did a new dam, they did the walkways, the dock. And then we told all the other developers,
It's the same.
you can put your water, your stormwater into that lake to keep it fresh and looking good. And then we charge them so that we have a maintenance fund so that we don't have to worry about maintaining that structure. We have funding for it. So it was kind of a really nice application of how we did that.
Hey, Bob, I think the question and the confusion is coming in. If we require 50/50, okay? And if the developer that had where Mayfield Park is didn't give us the park, what would their density have been? They didn't do that, and they just wanted to develop that land. What would their density have been?
Their density would have been, I'd have to look it up exactly what it would have been.
Just a ballpark.
They probably got, I don't know, how many units do you think they got extra in there? We'd have to look it up, but it wasn't.
It was 5
like,
acres is the park. So
yeah.
I need to look to see. It could have been, I'll double check, but it might be T2 because that's what civic spaces
Well,
are
yeah, I think it was
designated
outlined
as.
in the code.
So then it would be 5 units, but I'll double check to make sure it was
So-
T2. 5 units, and then each TDR equals 2
2
units. So they've
probably
got
got
10, and I'll
10
confirm
more.
it, but they get 10 additional units within the area that's been built outside of the 5 acre that's the park.
So
So
those 10 units, though, that's additional
to what they were getting
Density.
on the
versus if they didn't pay for anything, they wouldn't have had that additional 10 units.
That's correct.
correct.
But they could have bought TDRs and still got those 10 units and we wouldn't
Correct.
have had a park.
That's correct. They
Correct.
could have just went out and bought them and put them in.
Correct. They
But-
had the right
But-
to still buy those and still build 10 more units.
Right.
And we would have gotten some money for it.
So like Judy was saying, they took the money, instead of buying them, they took the money and said, well, just make the improvement. Now, did they get other benefit from it? I think so. I mean, look, they're selling their development saying, look, we're abutting a beautiful city park. It's got a lake. I mean, it is nice, right? To live next to all that. So in a sense, they did get a little benefit from it. And that's why I'm hoping these incentives would do that. Because when we look at these, you see the big sea of parking and, why not make that into a beautiful park? Let them donate it to the city and it can become a park of ours. Otherwise, they'd have to maintain it.
Sumit, did that answer your question?
No, I know. I'm trying to understand. I know you said like they could buy the TDRs, right? So I'm trying to understand, like as a developer, if I'm looking at from the development side, what is that real incentive? How is it benefiting me? Like from a number standpoint, what is it? And again, I'm also trying to understand that from like, if we are going to be, you or whoever is going to be talking to these developers and potentially steering them towards, hey, here's the incentive that we can give you, which is going to benefit us by getting parks and whatever else that we would like to have. Like what makes them go that route versus just saying, you know what, I'll just do the TDR. Or
Well,
whatever
when you
else.
really think of it, I mean, it does benefit them, right? To say, oh, now I have a park, a green that people can enjoy. If I put housing in there, I could tell everybody who's either renting or buying a house, look how nice it is. You have this big green, you got trails, you can run around. It becomes an amenity for the development, which is kind of.
We're about to go to decision point 2, but Robin?
Yes.
I just confirmed that the area that's now Mayfield Park was zone T2 civic. So I think that's another important part that when form-based code was created, there were areas that were designated as a future civic site. So that gave that ability to do that. Yes.
But in a sense, it was a.
Yes. I
trade-off.
mean, it's just a trade-off.
I'm
But
using
yes,
it as an
was,
example.
it would have been 10 units that they got.
But Bob, I think everyone is, for the most part, kind of on board with this, but I think it's important to show the difference in TDRs, incentives, and what the community really wants.
Okay.
And what the community wants, let's try to incorporate that. So,
Yes,
Okay.
I'll be more applicable to the individual sites. We'll stop playing with those numbers. And this way, when we present it to planning commission, we could show them what those ratios, how that's looking to really see if we're benefiting from it.
okay.
And just a point of clarification, what I'm hearing is it's open to the concept of incentives, not necessarily the specific incentives on this page. Maybe we'll come up with others. Maybe we'll determine that's too much for a picnic table. But the idea is the idea of exploring incentives and codifying them is the direction you want.
Exactly.
Okay, the next one is the 50-50 ratio. So I do want to look at that. Right now, if we review the 50-50 ratio requirement for multifamily and townhomes, earlier I shown you some examples of build-out schemes. There were 50-50, there was a 70-30, there was a 98-2, and there was even 100% non-residential. So we could look at these and say, okay, I think the larger sites are achievable at the 50-50. I think the ones that are along Highway 9 are a little tougher. When I looked at them and really worked with them, honestly, I was coming out with more of a 70-30 split. It was very hard for me to get a 50-50. I would just have to really reduce the residential portion. But it is doable. I mean, we can do it that way. We
Question,
can't say
Bob.
that it's a 50-50.
I think something that's important for everyone to understand that hasn't been mentioned is the 50-50, you still need a use permit under the current code, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, so is your recommendation that the use permit will continue or the use permit will go away? This is by right.
Right now, I was keeping the use permit in place.
Okay.
But I was saying if we do a 70-30, that the non-residential at 30 has to be retail. It's because it could just be non-residential. So they could say, oh, we're just going to build, like Fry's can turn around and say, we're going to build a self-storage building and housing. But that's not what I think we're envisioning here. We're envisioning this retail experience where people can come down and really use the stores and engage and kind of shop and enjoy that experience. So if it's a retail, I think we can say, look, we're really incentivizing retail. Some of the financial reporting we got back was retail's a little harder to incentivize and to get. They came back and kept saying retail's a little tougher. And I think if we can say, well, you'll do 70 housing and 30 retail, that will then push them to say, okay, we can get that retail built. Otherwise, we just keep it at the 50-50.
Bob, where does a hotel fall?
Non-residential. Hotels are really, we've incentivized hotels. I think they're 8 rooms per unit, which is pretty good. Now, a lot of developers came in and told me they don't want. Yesterday, I got a phone call at 6:30 at night from somebody who said, I want to build a 200-room hotel in Milton. I need 5 acres. How do I do that? So it's there are people that will come in and do some hotels. I'm showing some hotels on all the sites. I don't think we'll have hotels on every site. I'm just kind of showing somebody. Yeah, everybody comes in. I try to say, hey, would you like a hotel? Because I think we could really use a nice hotel. I'm really envisioning a boutique hotel at 80 rooms, but they came in and said they wanted 200 rooms.
Hey, Bob, today it's 50-50. The incentives could get you to 30-70 or 70, right? What is it, 70-30?
No, it doesn't.
I think the rate, depending on what the ratio is, then the incentives will go in line with that, if that makes sense.
Right.
7-3.
Right now, the way I have it, and I could change it, the way I have it right now is that any incentive density would still have to be at the current 50-50 ratio.
Oh, so the ratio wouldn't change. Okay, I'm checking with you.
Right.
So
And on the
just-
bigger sites, like the Fry's, not
right.
Fry's, on the Verizon and the Twin Tower and the H building, I think the sites are big enough. They're large sites. It's easy you could see that we could easily achieve a 50-50 on those. It's the ones that are a little linear and they're along Highway 9, a little tougher to achieve that 50-50. But we could work with them and just say, hey, it works at 50-50 and we can do it.
Well, I think one of the issues is whatever we got in place is not working. So if we keep it 50-50, do you expect much to change or do we need to add a lot of incentives in order to?
And the incentives would be different. The incentives is what we talked about before, and then the 50-50 ratio can stay. The next decision point will be years ago, the council didn't want any housing on Highway 9. So they put an exclusion in that says you can't have any townhouses on Highway 9, but you can have multifamily. You can do multifamily, vertically integrated multifamily, but no townhomes. So the next decision point I'm going to bring up is,
Well, before we get there,
We
so
talk about that,
What
so
are the three
just to
main
let you know.
drivers of changing it from 50/50?
the drivers.
Yeah, like what are the benefits? What do we get out of, or what do developers get out of changing it from 50?
Well, the benefit for the developer is they really wanted to be 100% housing and they couldn't care less about commercial. The housing is so advantageous right now. They just want to build housing. And we sort of, from a city perspective, we say, no, this is our commercial district. We want to push back. They said, well, we're not going to activate. We're not going to come in here and do it. It's just not financially feasible for us to come in and build commercial anymore. So they all want to build multifamily. That's really what they want to do. Now, we do have developers who come in and build all retail. And Adam Morgan came in down here, built all retail. He doesn't really have any housing here. He built all retail establishments. He showed a plan that said 100% retail. And I looked at it and said, well, it's a little harsh too. I really would like to see some split. And if we stay with 50-50, I'm fine with that because I think we could work with them to do a 50-50 split and get that density to work.
Can you go back to that one example where his current buy right is compared to what
Yes.
would be proposed? I know Councilmember Haney had a follow up.
Oh, wait. No, go back. Okay, go back. Next. Keep going. Yeah.
There.
So that's 100% retail office. And that's as of right? I mean, it's right in there. And he's used up all his density. And he's got, I think, only 10 TDRs. So virtually he's got his base density used there. I looked at it. I said, it works. I mean, he's got a lot of parking. And I said, it just kind of looks a little harsh. I mean, sometimes, the pendulum's swinging in both directions, right? So then I said, let me look. Now, I looked at it when I tried to put it together, the next one. That one, when I started to put it together, it's 70 housing and 30% retail and office. Now, if we did 50-50, we just have less houses and more retail space.
Yeah, those are townhomes, and I've just learned that I didn't know townhomes was part of the 50-50. I thought that was only multifamily. So I did not know townhomes was part of the 50-50 split. Because that looks somewhat inviting if we have the linear park, along Highway 9, has a good mix.
And that's what I was saying. If he was to do this and we'd say, look, it's normally 50-50. If you want to go to a 70-30, you have to guarantee us that the 30 is retail and office. So it's not a self-storage building or a light industrial use or a laboratory use or something that's not really what we're thinking. We're thinking it should be more of a interactive kind of, use like, retail experience.
I'll give my opinion so we can move along. 50-50 is what I'm comfortable with.
Okay.
What has been the feedback from the community in any of the other community events that you've had? Has this come up? Have you
No.
talked about this at all? Nothing. Okay.
No, I've told them it's 50-50 and, we talked about what amenities, what they would like to see, things like that. But we haven't discussed different ratios because we just got these from the developers and we planned them out. And I wanted to know what it would be. But if we maintain the 50-50, I think I could work with that. Certainly on all the bigger lots and the smaller lots, we'll just have to work with the developers to say, look, you'd have to do a 50-50 ratio.
So it's going to 70-30 is more to incent developers to come and build here. Nothing to do with the density. It's just the ratio of it.
That's correct.
But what you're also gaining is you're gaining all of the non-residential would then be retail also.
Right. So what I'm saying is the 30% would be all retail so that I guarantee that they'd have retail office kind of thing, right? And the 70% would be housing.
Go back to the other side really quick. So the other side, they can do that today. Is that
They could do
correct?
that today with the moratorium in place. He can come in and say, I want to build this. It's as of right. So there's no moratorium that would affect this. There's no rezoning, no use permits or anything because he has no housing.
But
The use
Bob, go
permits are
to
only for the
your
housing.
proposal. You could easily, that's 70-30. With your skills, you could make 50-50 look really good too.
We could reduce the housing amount, increase the floor plates of the retail. We could add office above and things like that to get more square footage, achieve those ratios.
If we went to the 50-50, do you still want to restrict the 50 on the what the non-residential could be?
It's already 50-50.
No, if we maintain the 50-50, I just leave it the way it is and just let's go with it. I was almost thinking of a 3-tier system at one point, saying, geez, do we want, a certain amount of retail in that? But I think at this point, anything on Highway 9, they would want to put retail because it's in demand to have retail on Highway 9.
I think having that linear park is something that is very important on.
Yeah, and the linear park there is, I am going to come back and say, geez, could we not put such big buffers in the back and shift the buffers in the front so that we end up with these linear parks? And if we shift the buffer dimension from the back to the front, then it's not really sort of a taking on the developer side. Otherwise, we'd have to say, oh, now we're restricting it, and they'd say, oh, well, I had the right to build on it, and the city's taking that away from me, and it could be challenged. But if we just take it from the back, which is just an enormous buffer in the back, and actually the residential behind it, I believe that's Avanson.
I'm sorry, we got off track just
Yeah.
looking at this. So, but
Okay.
on decision, are we gonna still have the use permit for 50-50? Or are we gonna say, if you're gonna do fee only townhomes, you don't have to get a use permit for that? Are we gonna have any flexibility on that?
We do. That's the next decision point.
Oh, okay, great, okay.
So that if we stay with the 50-50, let's jump. I think we're going to stay with the
Commission, do y'all have
50-50
any-
for now.
Y'all have any comments on this?
What?
I'm sorry.
I want to agree with Phil on the 50-50 for two main reasons. One was,
Okay.
they already mentioned, one hasn't. The mention is, I think we're going to need that commercial corridor, and decreasing commercial by 40% on Highway 9, one of our only commercial corridors, I think is a huge long-term mistake. Going from 50 to 30, number
Okay.
one. Number two is, I don't think no one's discussed yet, is the impact additional residential has on the city. Okay, I mean, it's got schools, it's expensive for us. Residential is a lot more expensive as a city, so I don't understand by changing this ratio to 70, I think that only hurts the city. Again, you look at fire, you look at police, you look at, more school, all that I mentioned, and you're looking at quite a few hundred units that additional by making that 70-30, 50-50 to 70-30 move. So I'm pretty hard against that if I had a vote, which I don't.
How does that change the tax base or anything like that if it were to go 70-30 versus 50-50? Do we get more tax income from commercial?
Well, we do get bigger tax from commercial than we do on housing.
And so is that analysis a part of kind of your analysis, your group's analysis in terms of, hey, if we were to change this to 70-30, this is how much we lose in tax revenue versus 50-50? Yeah.
We would lose, and I don't have those numbers, but we would lose. I was just saying that if we incentivize it to be retail 30, then we're basically, what I'm doing is giving a real big incentive to somebody to activate that site and say, okay, we'll build it. It's pretty advantageous for us to build it.
Yeah, I think the difficulty in that is the what if that says if we allowed 100% multifamily right now, they'd start developing soon.
Yeah.
You don't know how long if we say no 50-50, we may have to wait for that to develop. We might have to wait for the economic environment to change where there is more of a demand for office space. So it's a little hard to do the analysis because I think time is a factor as well.
But again, it also goes back to like, this is our commercial corridor. Do we want to keep it that way? Right. And so, if all this other stuff is, the old saying, right? If you build it, they will come. So if everything else is coming along, people would want to be here, want to keep that. And then again, going back to your even 50-50, one thing to think about is, do we want to make sure that that other 50% that is commercial, what do we want? Do we want it to be retail more? Do we not want it to be where, yeah, they have 50-50 and then it's self-storage and this and that? What do we want to develop here, right? What do we want that area to look like, right? Do we want it to be more retail and walkability and people going everywhere and having that atmosphere here?
And maybe one option is we say we're keeping it 50-50, but anything along Highway 9, that non-residential has to be a retail office component versus in the other districts, you can do light manufacturing, you can do, other uses that I don't think would be there. But I certainly don't want to see self-storage buildings on Highway 9 any more than we have already.
I mean, look what the public said. Look at the concepts. Look at the experience that they want to enjoy in Deerfield, to your point. So what we saw is what the community is asking for. That's what we should give them.
That's what that's what I'm saying too. The 50-50, even if we keep it 50-50, restricting that 50% on the commercial to what we want it to be.
Right.
Sell whatever else, we don't need more self-storage units or whatever,
But
this is what we would like.
in some ways, can we do that? Because if they do want to include any multifamily or townhouses amongst that 50-50, they'd need to come in for a use permit, which would be approved on a case-by-case basis.
Bob, is there any economic impact to the businesses and the developers wanting to build retail or whatever of there not being more residences over there?
Well, if you take a straight financial study, all the retail owners or developers will tell you the more housing we have, the stronger incentive it is to support that retail. If you look at it today, some of the analysis comes in that says, it's almost a zero-based retail component because they really say, as of today, the way to make money is to do multifamily, so don't push any retail. But when we really study the corridor and talk to the developers on the ground, retail is kind of strong, and we should have a nice retail component along Highway 9. The envisionment of what we're thinking about, the experience, does have retail as a component in there. It does have that. People want to go to a coffee shop. They want to go to, get services done. And so I think the retail component, maybe we say 50-50, but on Highway 9, we're gonna want it, that 50-50, the non-residential component has to be a retail or office-based component. So we don't get these peripheral uses like a self-storage building
Well, I think we
that
don't
really
want
doesn't give us
self-storage
the
buildings,
benefit.
but we also don't want a bunch of vacant buildings.
Yes. That's a good point. And that's why I was thinking the balance would be around a 70-30, would give them a good balance along Highway 9 to keep the retail survivable, keep the square footage visually to show you what it might look like. We could get 50 in there. We could just get it up and tell them to do second-story office, and that would push it up to the 50. I think we can do that. And you'd have like two-story buildings instead of one-story retail. Might look nice to have two-story and have some office up on top.
I mean, again, commercial property is more expensive than residential properties. So by changing this, are we really devaluing some of those properties by saying instead of 50% commercial, which would have a higher cost, now you only have 30% commercial? Are we causing ourselves a short-term or long-term tax issue of saying, oh, now this isn't worth as much as it would be if it was more commercial?
Well, we're not requiring them to do it. We're just giving them that cap. So if Adam Morgan came in right now and said, I still want to do 100%, I mean, we're not requiring him to do 50-50. We're only requiring him to do 50-50 if he puts housing in there. If he doesn't put housing, he can do 100% commercial. So it's not really devaluing his tax base, his tax valuation of the property. It's just that if you want to include a residential component into those developments, we're going to impose the 50-50 rule on you.
So in other words, the 50% is a cap on the amount of residential,
That's correct.
T6.
And right now, along Highway 9, it's only multifamily because the next decision point will be, should we allow townhouses along Highway 9? Right now, it's only multifamily, which I think is really tough because we're forcing people to build apartment houses in order to meet. If you're going to do housing, you have to do an apartment. I think that's kind of
Depends
harsh.
if it's T5 or T6, Bob.
Hmm?
Depends if it's T5 or T6. We'll get in the next one.
Yeah, I got both of these on my decision points. Okay, so let me make sure I get it. We're going to maintain the 50/50? Councilman?
Does anybody have any discussion on that? Okay.
Okay.
I
just
guess
wanna
my
make sure
only
that-
other point that I have made to Bob in the past is if in the next 2 years it doesn't turn around and doesn't get developed, we can talk about it again.
Yeah, I think,
That's right.
I think part of the
That's
issue
true.
is nothing's being done and nothing has been done. And if nothing continues to be done, these shops will continue to roll over to new property owners, leases expire, they end up moving out, or tenants start receiving tenants that are not to our standard.
That's
I
my,
think
that's my concern.
that's an ultimate problem that needs to be addressed, because if nothing happens, that's what will happen eventually.
Yeah,
Yes.
not that I'm advocating for more density, but I don't want a bunch of retail buildings that are built that then just go vacant or turn over all the time, because now we've got all these great shops and restaurants, but we don't have enough people to support them.
Yeah.
And you look at Crabapple right now, and that's kind of what we have going on. I don't want Highway 9 Deerfield to be the same.
Yeah.
Have an abundance of retail and not enough people to support it. It is smack dab between Halcyon, Alpharetta, downtown Alpharetta, Avalon, and Crabapple.
The thing you got to be careful of, though, is that we don't become the bedroom community for all of them. Just choke ourselves out because the roads are so crowded because we have all this additional density. So there's a fine line there between what you're asking. And I think we've got to give this program a shot, but at 50/50, where we're not risking just too much density. I mean, there's still going to end up being, compared to what's there today, there will be a lot more density. Look how crowded it is in some areas right now. Now, we're going to have a 4-lane road that'll change that a little bit, but still, even with 50/50, we're going to be much busier and a lot more traffic. Going to 70/30, it could choke us out.
That McGinnis Ferry interchange, I think, is going to change a
It'll
lot.
change a lot,
For
yeah.
sure. So,
And I do believe, like Judy mentioned, I think we'll always have people willing to put multifamilies up there. You know, again, we've had to fight that since 2006. I think if things don't improve, that'll always be an option.
Are there any, Bob, are there any other, I mean, you know, you hear developments where the municipality has given, let's say, tax incentives or things like that. Are there any other things that we're doing outside the box to kind of fight, get those developers to come?
No, we're not. We looked into things like, oh, should we eliminate impact fees and other incentives? But at the end of the day, we're not really
Is that an
proposing to
option?
do any of that.
I'm sorry?
We're not proposing to do any of that.
Okay. But I mean, is that an option? Is that something that,
I'd have to check with legal if we can do that.
again, I'm not sure how long this has been going on where, you know, we've been trying to get and there hasn't been happening, but you know, at some point, like, is that something that we can look into to kind of put together our package of an incentive for people, for businesses and whoever to come in here, right? And if you have something like that, I mean, you know, you hear about that all the time where development has come and they've been given tax incentives to put their project there.
You know, I tend to try to keep all our tax income and revenue as high as we can and just ask the developer to do it. And that's why I wanted to do those incentives to get them in here to do it. We'll give them some, let them sort of get the incentive to put those to the odds instead of buying them. But I don't know if I want to.
No,
Well,
I mean,
let's
I
see what
understand that, but I'm
happens.
saying, I don't know if there's an analysis. I'm sure there's a financial analysis in terms of like, okay, if we
Yes.
lose this incentive or lose tax revenue now, but then the gain down the road, you make it back up because now you've got this here.
Yeah. Well, we do have one incentive. I don't know, Bernadette, can you want to shed some light on the occupational tax incentive that we have in Deerfield right now? Do you mind? We did do one incentive. We didn't do impact fee incentives, but we did occupational tax, right?
We took a look and we had reduced the occupational taxes from gross receipts to a per employee basis for certain qualifying businesses under certain NAICS codes. So trying to bring those that had higher amounts of employees that might also frequent some of our storefronts in that area. So we had some qualifying factors. They had to have certain income thresholds and a certain number of employees, bringing them into the district. That's what currently we have. So that was our first dabble in that kind of area.
Yeah, what we found is other neighboring cities they were more competitive with that particular item. And the companies were coming in saying, you're giving me a tax on something that, is not really fair. I can go to the other city and get it. So we've been neutralizing that by giving incentives. But we said, you have to have a certain number of employees. You have to have a certain, meet all the standards so that we don't have somebody coming in with 3 employees saying they want to take advantage of it. We want to incentivize a lot of members of employees.
Decision
Okay.
point 4?
Yes, sir.
Great.
Wait,
No, we're
sorry.
on, I think
3.
we already.
3.
3. We're getting through them. One of
Oh.
them's really easy, so I think it's going to be, at least we got one that's easy. All right. Is the council and planning commission open to allowing townhomes as a use permit along the Highway 9 corridor? Now, again, in the past, councils have put a little footnote, because it says you're allowed to have some housing there, but they put a little footnote in there, number 5, 6, whatever footnote that is, that says, well, along Highway 9, you can't do this. You could do multifamily, but vertically integrated, but you can't have townhomes. Because I think we were getting a lot of applications in for like tons of townhomes, and they said, well, we don't want to flood it with townhomes, right? So we were putting it in because I said, well, geez, the beauty of a townhome is that it's a for sale unit versus a rental unit. And I thought to encourage townhomes along Highway 9 would be a better residential option, density-wise too, because you're not going to see these big, massive rental, multifamily type units with 200, 300 units in them, which are pretty big. If we allow townhomes, then we're allowing another kind of residential use to help meet some of that. They'd still have to do the 50-50 ratio, but it would just be a townhouse unit. Right now, we don't allow any townhouses on Highway 9 at all. So things like the Apple Orchard site is really kind of a tough site to build out because people come in and say, that's the one with the fence and the barbed wire on the street. They say, well, Bob, it just doesn't pay for us to do all commercial in there. It's too small. It's not big enough to do all commercial. So
They can do, what you're saying is they can do townhomes, but they still have to have that commercial component, correct?
that's correct. They still have to, once they put that townhouse in there, they still have to meet the 50-50 requirement. And it's still a use permit, so the council would still see it and come before council to say, well, this is where we're placing them and what we're doing to make sure the council's okay with the use of those townhomes.
If
in
you're
that
saying
area.
a use permit's involved, then
Yeah, it's still,
yeah.
The distinguishing difference is it's along Highway 9, not interior to it. It's on Highway 9.
well, let's see, it could be on Highway 9 or behind, like somebody, like, all right, Stone Creek Church, they're looking to do some retail along the street and then townhomes and housing behind it. So that's the way that would lay out. So
It'd be up to
a lot of people coming in saying that they put the housing in the back, but they could put the housing along Highway 9 as well. I couldn't stop them.
But it would be up to the developer, right?
It'd be
It's
up to the
whether they put on the
developer.
front or the back.
Yes.
Well, also, if it's a use permit, it would have to get approved by
Yes.
you guys.
Yeah, council would have to look at it and say, well, why are you putting it here? Shift it there, move it around. I think it's just more flexibility. And
And I think it's important because I remember when that was originally done, when it said no townhomes on Highway 9, I think the council at the time or planning commission at the time was thinking a lot on Highway 9. I don't think they were thinking the whole parcel.
Right.
So our code reads the whole parcel means you can't
That's
have,
correct.
which I think the whole thinking was on Highway 9, as far as you can have commercial up front and townhomes in the back. And I think now what you're suggesting is we're open to it as long as it still meets that 50-50.
Yes.
especially if it has to go through DRB and stuff.
Has to go through DRB and has to, now I just want to tell the council a quick reminder that the 5-acre sites do allow townhomes. That was the negotiated settlement on the 5-acre sites. And we do have a project coming in.
Can I just throw something
Yeah.
in? I just want to be clear that the current code as it's written, the city attorney had determined, yes, we looked at developments where they proposed commercial along the frontage, but then there was a road that went back to, obviously, to the residential, whether it was townhomes or single family, and they determined it would be going against that regulation. And just to clarify, it would include not just townhomes, but single family residential, because we do have builders who do smaller lots that are permitted in the T4 kind of area. So just want to make sure that the council and planning commission understand that we're not just talking townhomes, we're talking anything that's residential that's not vertically integrated. So if that makes sense.
And Bob, when you say townhomes, are you also including triplexes, quads, other duplexes, or just townhouses? Because we define them differently.
We do. I would want to keep the 50-50 ratio for all those units. I think that's what Robin's trying to say, that there's other types of housing, and we want to maintain the 50-50 ratio for them, or, and a use permit. We'll just say along Highway 9, a use permit, so they have to go to council. Council could review the site plan and say, we think this is an appropriate use of the land, and it looks nice. We're maintaining the ratio. It still has that, I don't want to get rid of the use permit. We talked about it, but I think the use permit kind of helps us make sure that the site plan is acceptable to council.
Right, and then
Planning
my other-
Commission have any concerns?
Is there a way to, if we wanted to restrict the townhome facing Highway 9, being on the front of Highway 9, is that allowed right now, or would we have to make any changes for that development to happen where you could have commercial front, townhomes would still be on that parcel?
Yes, right now it's worded, if the lot is abutting Highway 9. I think if we work with legal, we could probably put something in that would better describe that and say townhomes are permitted via use permit, but they can't physically, face front
the,
Highway 9.
Yeah,
So that they
Bob,
have to be in the back.
But if it's a use permit,
You're
which,
gonna capture that anyway.
I'm indifferent on that, but I understand exactly what you're going for. But if it's a use permit, planning commission, council can say, you're going to do this. I mean, you
Right.
can move it however you
You could
want.
just, as long as you keep the use
I'm also
permit, you have
trying
a lot.
to, if we wanted to keep it that way from a development standpoint, because if council decided that we want to allow the townhome to be on the front, right? Then I want to try to also negate that ability too.
Yeah.
So if we had a way to do that where that's not an option, permit would help in terms of design, but they couldn't have a townhome on the
No
front.
matter what, even if council looked at it like that.
Bob, can you go back to the alternative you had proposed for the property north of Coles? I thought you had some
That one?
that one.
That one there, I do have townhouses abutting Highway 9 on that.
And then behind it is single family, which is also something we need to probably discuss because single family is not permitted in G5.
I think that's what Robin was saying, is that it would apply to all housing,
All
not just townhouses.
But we'd make them all subject to a use permit.
But yeah, I think your point earlier was that those townhomes are also buffered from Highway 9 by
The linear park.
The linear park.
right?
That's why I wasn't initially putting in a total exclusion, because I thought maybe this one is horizontally like that, might look really nice. Otherwise, we're going to end up with all linear retail and all townhouses
Yeah,
in the back.
it's important to have
know,
a
A little flexibility in the
good
mix. on it.
mix, and otherwise you're just going to look like any other. Just
Yeah, it'll just be a run of all retail.
Yeah.
I don't think anybody
Okay.
wants to see the backs of townhomes on Highway 9.
Yeah.
So I think that
All right.
could clarify that.
On this one, I'm leaving it, use permit, townhouses and residential would be permitted. Okay, that's great. Now let's, number 4. Now we're just going to jump to the T6 zone. So this was Highway 9. Now in the T6 zone, it's the same thing. We're allowing multifamily, but we're not allowing residential. And a lot of people came in, developers said, we want some townhouses in the T6 Trans 6 zone. So it's the same discussion, it's just not on Highway 9, it's internal. I think maybe we could just leave it exactly what we did. We're saying housing is okay, but it's all subject to use permit, so
Yes.
that we can do it.
Yes.
Picked up some time. Look at that.
Planning
Wow.
Commission, y'all have any opinions, just chime on in.
Anything? We're good on T6, Judy?
And it just T6 residential would all be use permit
Yes. Still subject to the 50/50.
with the exception of work live, which is current.
Yes. Okay, decision number 5. This one, I'm hoping this is an easy one. Can we allow stormwater facilities to be counted as open space when designed as a public amenity? So right now we have an open space requirement, and detention, stormwater ponds do not count towards that open space. But in a lot of different scenarios, and the one on the right is Kensley, that's in Deerfield. I made that stormwater detention pond into a public amenity. We did that, and then we gave him some credit towards his open space requirement. So you could see it become a nice amenity for people to use as a park. Same thing we did in Birmingham. I did one on 140, and then we have the Mayfield Park. So it's, you could take, if we, instead of having these, I hate to say ugly, but these kind of unsightly detention ponds with fencing around it, some bushes, we could turn these things into beautiful amenities, lakes. I know I was talking to Fred before, and he grabbed me and said, Bob, why aren't we making our lakes, these detention ponds into these great, beautiful public amenities? I told him, I said, well, wait till we get to decision 5, so hopefully you can speak up a little bit and tell them what you think. But I think it's just a natural way to allow this to happen if they make it a public amenity.
I guess my big question on that is, who owns it? Is it, and who's responsible for maintaining that is the bigger question.
Right now, all of these, that one on the top, we gave them some density, right? So they gave it to the city. So we're maintaining it. The other 2 are privately owned developers who are maintaining it.
Yeah, I think we need to implement some maintenance standards. Like you said, most of them are just left to grow wild and all that. And again, I do like the underground detention we have just down the road here.
Yes.
That I think is a no-brainer, whereas this is a bit different.
Yeah. Underground is underground. It wouldn't, you could put civic space over an underground detention facility. Some
And-
people do that too. But these are ones that where the lake is, or the stormwater is visible, and people can walk around and use it as an
I think
area.
to Kurt's
Just-
point, if we don't own it or maintain it, there's got to be standards or expectations set that it's maintained to a certain aesthetic look
Okay.
and feel.
I would, they pay to maintain it, and, we need to have our standards. That would be the,
So long as it
They pay
doesn't
us to
look like,
maintain it. Yeah.
so long as it doesn't look like Bethany Bend and Hopewell. Because that one still looks really bad,
Yeah, and that's not a public amenity. That's just a detention pond that looks
really bad.
really bad. And that's what I'm trying to avoid. I'm trying to avoid people coming in building just really bad detention ponds. Sometimes the low point is in the front of the property, and that's when they start bringing them forward, and then we're stuck looking at them. I'd rather sort of tell them, look, instead of giving me other open space, let's amenitize this and make it look into a really nice space.
Because they are getting a break to do that, correct? The developer is getting a break in order to count that as open space.
As open space.
So he or she.
They are getting some
something in
benefit
return.
out of it, yeah.
Yeah,
But they're
getting
improving
benefit,
it.
so.
But they are improving it. They're making that improvement, making it into a park.
I think we're good.
I think we're good on that one?
Yep, and Bob, I think one of the conditions on Birmingham Crossroads, even though it's part of the development and maintained, is that it's open to the public.
Yes. Yeah.
So one more before we get to 6, because I won't be speaking then. So what, of the 5 above that, they all require use permits except for the first one, I think. Everything that, nothing is by right, other than the incentives that we would give. Is that right?
The stormwater would be allowed by right if they want to amenitize it. The townhomes and housing would be use permits. And the
So all the
50/50 we're
developments-
maintaining.
So every development would still need permitting, use permitting. Nothing is by right.
They need use permit if, yeah, once they're putting in some housing. They'd have to maintain the 50/50 and then still have to get a use permit on top of that. Make sure. All right. This is great. I'm getting good feedback. I think we're doing really good here, Steve. Decision 6, is the council and planning commission open to including the front portion of Stone Creek Church property to a T5 zone consistent with the balance of the corridor? A little history here when we did the transect zones and the zoning and whatnot. The church was there, and I think staff's attitude was, all right, it's just a church, leave it alone, and we just kind of left it as a T2. The whole corridor at one point was all T2. It was just all 1 acre zoning. So we said, oh, let's leave it that way. And the more we studied it, and then the church came in and we talked to them, we said, geez, it's really just that spot is so inconsistent with the rest of the corridor, and I think it would look nice to have the whole corridor have a nicer identity to it. We would get a linear park or a pocket park, the linear parks, pocket parks in the front. We would get some retail along the Highway 9 corridor, and then some housing in the back. They have a tremendous amount of open space already existing, but they are looking to come in and make the public spaces up in the front portion much more public interactive. The back would remain as a natural area, but there would be a trail, pedestrian trail connecting from Cogburn to the front. Now that demarcation line right now is where it is. It's that red line coming down. I think the church would like to see it move over a little bit to the left, but when you look at the subdivisions, we have the quads on the bottom. I think it's the apple orchards. And then on the backside is a T2. It's the Hermitage, I believe. So right now we're just showing it naturally dropping down. That's what we're showing in there.
Hey, Jackie, can you put the Deerfield regulating plan map up? I think it's like the 4th or 5th slide.
Yeah, go back a little bit. I think you got a bigger one.
It's good just to take a outside view of it all.
Yeah, there we go. You can kind of see where that purple line would just drop straight down in there.
Jackie, do you have a pointer on that thing? Just for everyone's purpose of seeing.
Do we have a pointer?
I mean,
Maybe
I
can
think
we
that
use-
line, Bob, is very,
Right here.
very
Okay.
important that it stays there to protect the Hermitage residents, because the Hermitage subdivision is much different than the subdivision, the
In
orchards.
the orchards, yeah.
So, I don't necessarily have an issue with, as long as the zoning stays the same along Highway 9, I don't see an issue.
Okay.
Bob, I'll give you my feedback. I think that was just a miss. It's not consistent. It should have been drawn down. Second to that, the whole idea of these sub-districts, I think make a whole lot of sense, because I don't think we can treat the entire Deerfield, Highway 9 with one fell swoop. I think different zoning, different restrictions is applicable in these sub-districts to maintain the look and the character coming down the corridor. I think this is a fix that should be made. It's a fix. And I would say on behalf of Stone Creek, they've been more than gracious in terms of connectability and trails to Cogburn. Trails is a big deal for the city. The fact that we can get from Cogburn over to Highway 9 through their property is also a big deal. So I would be in support of this.
It also drives the commercial that we're looking for.
Yep.
I mean, part of what we've been all saying is that we want to make sure we maintain commercial in Deerfield. By changing this to T5, we give the opportunity to have a little more commercial in an area where we don't have a whole lot. So,
With pocket parks.
yeah, but we have the opportunity to do a little bit more there. So personally, I'd like to see us do that.
Would it be creating a situation where a multifamily unit could go there in a place where we wouldn't necessarily be able to have one?
Well, that one's a really tough site because that, right now, currently, there's a height restriction of 2 stories there. So it really wouldn't lend itself to any multifamily in there. Initially, I think the church was thinking of some multifamily, but then we said, no, there's a height restriction, and that kind of killed it.
So there'd still be a height restriction if it was done differently.
That's correct. Even at T5, that the underlying is still, the height restriction is still in that area. We'd maintain that.
They still got to do the 50/50 or whatever that.
They'd still
the
have to
same
do,
mix
right
like
now,
everything
they'd still
else.
have to do the same mix.
Okay.
They'd still have to maintain the height restriction of 2 stories.
Planning Commission, have any thoughts on that? Good. Okay.
Good, we're good? Good. Well, that was all of them, so I want to say thank you to the council and the planning commission. I think we
Bob,
got
really
some great
quick, can you
feedback.
give the audience and Planning Commission and Council the next steps and timelines?
Oh, the
You
next,
can ballpark it.
the one?
You can ballpark it. If,
The next steps would be, given this information, we're going to come back, staff will assimilate all this. We'll start rewriting some of this text as text amendments. Then we're going to start the process of going through that whole text amendment process, which is the CZIM, Planning Commission, Council. You know, we'd go through the whole thing. That's probably going to take maybe 4 or 5 months, Norman, to go through it all.
If we start immediately, and it could be done and in front of the council in June, the beginning of June, and we've allowed for an extra month with the moratorium. So, yes.
Bob, if we could at some point, sooner than later, get dates on that, right? When is CZIM?
Yep.
When's DRB? When's
We
planning?
can have all that. Now that, I wasn't sure how this meeting was going to go, if you needed us to come back one more time, but I think I got a lot out of it. So I think we'll be able to come to the next council meeting and just do a quick presentation and let you all know what those dates are looking like. We'll make sure.
Nice presentation.
All right.
Great job.
thank you, Bob.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bob.
Appreciate it.
Thank you, everyone.
Yep, we're adjourned. It's not no formal meeting, so it's going.